So, good morning or good night, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to another interview of the Chill Dude on a Couch. I'm your host, Hector, and tonight I'm joined by Chiara Oscuro. And this is a project that the best way to experience it is like watching the album teaser that's on YouTube because it's very experimental. There's some drone in the music. There's also some like singing that's hard to describe the sound, and some shoegaze influence to the sound as well. So I'm joined here by Chiara, and we're here to talk about the upcoming album Rancor Succor that's coming out on September the 29th. So Chiara, how are you today?
Hi, I'm well. It's a nice, actually sunny day in San Francisco. Usually it's foggy in my neighborhood, but today we actually have sun. Yeah,
Yeah,
nice
that's
to be.
good. So I listened to the album, and yes, it's very different. The word experimental is very uh thrown out in this album. So I want to talk to you about your singing style. How did you find it? Because I also saw on YouTube that you have a few videos up on your channel of you singing in some places, and you're a multi-instrumentalist. So it's very interesting because it's very like ethereal, like almost music for meditation in a way. So
Hmm,
describe to me like how do you make your because obviously the focal part of the music is your distinctive voice, in my opinion.
thank you. Yeah, my vocal palette has evolved a lot over the years, and it's based on a lot of different influences. When I was younger, I started out in the more traditional route. I actually started out as a flautist, which gives you really good breath control.
Mhm.
And then I moved on to studying classical voice, and I did that for 4 years. And I then relocated to New York City for college to study experimental theater, which by nature incorporates music, movement as well. And I got pretty tired of the classical box. I just felt like a snake that was itching to shed its skin. It just felt very limiting to me. And there was this very tiny ad in the Village Voice newspaper. This was in the mid 90s, uh, where a voice teacher said, use your voice as an instrument. And that was it. I was like, that's it. That's what I want. And I wound up studying with that person, Dory Levine, for several years. She's a jazz improv teacher, and that's really what started to open up doors for me of possibilities and using the voice as an instrument. So everything from vocal percussion to extended vocal techniques. And then over the years, I started studying things like Hindustani vocal technique, Bulgarian, Georgian, and then I listened to a lot of experimental and world music too, a lot of Eastern music, Persian, Indian music. So everything we listen to becomes us.
Yeah, that's
Um,
very true.
would you say very spiritual?
No, that's very true.
Oh yeah, and spiritual too. Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's the accumulation of lots of different influences, but that metaphor of the palette and having different colors to choose from and pick from, and also just having a very strong connection to emotion. It's really important to me that the music and the singing are very emotionally connected.
No, yeah, there's that's what I got from listening to the music and the album teaser that you have on YouTube. It has like a little bit of like every part like of this different songs, and I'll put the link to that so people can take like get like a taste of what the sound is like. uh Plus you got your like you got some makeup on, you got some different wardrobes, and you're very in nature, and it seems that water is very important in this record. And I was reading that you recorded this in Colorado in a place called the Tank. So I want you to talk a little bit about that recording because it sounded very different.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, you're right. Water shows up a lot in the sounds on the album. And as a visual metaphor in the album trailer shot by Bobby Cochran and edited by Alexandra Van Hazel. Um, yeah, so several years ago, probably going on about 6 years ago, I was at a holiday party for Hyde Street Studios here in San Francisco, which is a legendary recording studio. A lot of punk bands, legendary punk bands have recorded there. I think like Grateful Dead have recorded there. They have an annual holiday party where there are open studios for a lot of the producers who have studios there, and I happened to wander into somebody's studio, somebody who works in like film and television soundtrack, and I noticed he had a Laurie Anderson vinyl album, and so we were talking about that, and somehow it came up. I mentioned my first EP, Pomegranate Wine, which was partially recorded at Battery Townsley, which is an old World War II artillery battery here in Northern California that has a really amazing natural reverb. And I was telling him that I really liked recording in spaces that had really interesting natural reverb. And he said, "Oh, I'm affiliated with this place in Colorado that sounds like it would be up your alley, called The Tank." And so I researched it, and yeah, it is a 7-story former stainless, well, it's still stainless steel, but it was initially intended to be a water tank, I think, for the railroads. But there's so much shale in the earth there that it became, the floor became curved, so it became useless as a water tank. And in the early 80s, Bruce Odland, an experimental musician and composer, was turned onto this space, which you could get in through at the time through a little crawl space. And there was just this amazing natural 40-second reverb with some really interesting shifts in pitch. And in the, I think, early 2010s, it was actually up for sale, and then a bunch of people banded together and formed a nonprofit to officially convert it to a center for recording. And so, yeah, I went out there before COVID in fall of 2019 to record 2 tracks, which are now on this album, Rancor Succor, In the Manner of Serpents and La Perdita. And yeah, it was a tremendous experience because the space is basically an instrument all unto itself. And you have to kind of learn how the reverb works and how the changes in pitch work and collaborate with it. And it was one of the most epic recording experiences I've had sonically.
Yeah, sounds very interesting. There was one artist that I interviewed a few months ago that he actually recorded his album in a cave. So
Yeah, who was that?
Maulen is his name, and it's kind of like experimental rock music. It was very interesting,
Yeah.
like yeah, the way that they recorded, and he actually like wrote the album in a desert. Like he
Wow.
went with a note. I'm like, yeah, that's very interesting. So you did 2 tracks in the tank, or and the other tracks where did you record the rest of the album?
Some of the album was recorded at my home studio in San Francisco. Um, and some tracks were recorded with one of the producers I worked with in his home studio, Scott Brown. Um, and some of the tracks were recorded at Tiny Telephone in Oakland with Danielle Goldsmith, a fabulous engineer there. And one track was recorded in Rancho Rivera, which is a small little outpost of Hyde Street Studios, the bigger studio I mentioned earlier. So several different spaces, and some of that was during COVID too. So having to finagle things, yeah, with masks and bringing in my own mic. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, it was interesting. So, and something about this album is like sometimes your voice, you sustain it, and yeah, it's very unique and different sounding. So, what technique do you use to for to keeping your vocal cords, healthy, because it really sounds very, it's very different from it's a very unique way of singing.
Yeah, um, there are lots of things. I mean, first and foremost, keeping the body healthy. So I do a lot of yoga, and there are certain exercises a voice teacher taught me to help increase my lung capacity and my abdominal strength. Um, and yeah, there's certain things that we do as singers, certain dietary things or things we stay away from to help keep our bodies healthy because it's extremely physical. And the more that you ask your voice to do, the more supple and strong you need to be. But I would say ultimately the biggest thing that contributes to me being able to do what I do is getting out of my own way and trusting my intuition. At my heart, I'm an improviser, and I think at it, at its root, improvisation is just like letting ourselves be open and being a vessel. So at the end of the day, that's the biggest thing that contributes to my sound is like being open enough to trust what I'm hearing and just let myself be a vessel for it.
Yeah, and when I was listening to albums, sometimes there's music that you listen to that you know where a song is going. I didn't know where your album was going.
Awesome.
So
Good. I'm glad.
yes, I'm like, yeah, I don't know where it's going, or I'm like, oh, look, she went this other way. So yeah, it's pretty interesting. So I'm gonna show the artwork for the
Yeah.
album, which is pretty interesting. Here we have the artwork for the upcoming album. So yeah, it's very artistic. You're in a tub. What were you trying to convey with this album artwork?
Yeah, that image was shot by Kevin Shapiro, a very talented photographer, makeup artist, visual artist. Um, that image just kept coming to me intuitively of being covered in black paint and having dirty water. Again, like you had mentioned, water kept coming up in the album. Like water is a symbol for the unconscious. And playing on this idea, like ChiaraOscuro, the name itself references light and dark, light and shadow. So, the tub is a place of purification and cleansing and renewal. But for me, like I kept getting this image of having dark water, something about like renewing, but also having to confront one's shadow, one's darkness. Um, Kind of almost like alchemical themes. Also, just looked really cool. And I come from an experimental theater and performance art background. So I just intuitively gravitate towards doing visuals that are very messy. I love being covered in paint. I did a shoot several months ago with a photographer, Francis O'Keefe. Also being used for some of the promo for this album, where I'm covered in pomegranate guts and pomegranate juice. I love making a big mess, and I
Oh
think
yeah,
it's
I'm using that photo as the thumbnail.
awesome. Yeah. So, as a woman, especially, I love both visually and through my music to have uncomfortable juxtapositions of beauty, like traditional feminine beauty, but also mess and rawness and rage, sexuality, undomesticated vibes. It's meant to be confrontational and something you need to take another look at.
No, yeah. Plus, for people that don't know Spanish, oscuro means dark. So
Yeah.
it goes with the. So I like the album title, and I was like looking at what Rancor and Succor meant, because they're, and I saw the meaning of them. What does the album title mean for you?
Mm. That was another thing that came to me intuitively um, for about 5 years, even before the album came out. Rancor to me is like anger, especially like anger that's been festering, rage, or even hatred. Um, and definitely, yeah, I had my own experiences of rancor, especially over the past several years. And usually for me, music is where I put those feelings so that they don't uh, corrode me from the inside
Mhm.
out, so they don't destroy me, or is a safe haven. So, as you had mentioned earlier, like there are lots of like ethereal or meditative sounds, but there are also angry sounds and raw sounds and undomesticated vocal sounds in this album. So I felt like that was the Rancor part. And Succor
Yeah.
is, um, to appease, to sweeten. And I also liked that sucker also sounds like being a sucker. So there's still some irony, there's still some edge, there's still some anger. I liked how it sounded, and I liked again this idea of the interplay of light and shadow, of sweetness and darkness. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that because yeah, there's part of the albums that are more aggressive. It kind of reminded me a little bit of this artist that I love, Chelsea Wu,
Yeah. Yeah.
that she has like different because she has had like different. No album of her sounds the same.
Yeah.
Uh, so it reminded me a little bit when it went in the angrier parts. So for you in this album, so I know it has. I think it's, if I'm not mistaken, it's 10 tracks. Uh, what are your favorite tracks of the like let's do this, like in the tracks that you were working on, which one for you was the most challenging,
Mm.
which one for you is like the song that you would say like represents the album as a whole, and which
Mm.
album was the
Ooh,
like which song was the just came out the easiest. So yeah, we have
ooh,
three questions
good questions. You
there.
might need
The
to
most
remind me.
challenging, the
Okay.
one that would represent the album the best, and the one that was the easiest to write.
Okay. The most challenging one. Well, it's funny. There were a couple tracks that I had worked on that didn't quite make it onto the album that I'm gonna be, at least one of them, I'm gonna be putting on the next album because some songs just, they're like wine. They need time to ferment and age and kind of be understood. So the most challenging is the one that didn't make it onto the album. I would say the next most challenging one um, was probably Her Life Giving Caresses, which is a completely a cappella song that I initially wrote on a looper. And the challenges of recording and mixing that, I worked with Marta Soloni, who's a fabulous um, Italian producer based in London who's worked with Bjork, and many other artists I respect too. Nick's Electronic Drum Choir. I don't know if you know them. I'm big fans. Um, Big fan. I would say that one was the most challenging, figuring that out, and
Yeah,
especially
singing a
because it,
cappella, only your voice. Yeah, that has to be challenging because it's just your voice.
yes,
Hmm.
and it's highly rhythmic, and it ends with a big vocal percussion section, so everything has to be timed just so. Um, so that was the most challenging for sure. And then you said like the defining song.
Yeah, the song that you would say, like if someone asks, what does Chiara Oscuro sound like? Listen to this song, like the song that represents the album as a whole.
Yeah, it's interesting too because I do feel like the album covers some different terrain.
Oh yeah.
Like there are different sub albums in the album, there are different flavors, but I would say the first single in the Manner of Serpents is the defining song. That was recorded at the Tank. It was mixed by Daniel Knowles, who is based in LA, and he is a shoegazer too. He's a fabulous producer with a big shoegaze background. And so I felt like he really understood the dark, ecstatic, psychedelic vision I had for the song. And the song is semi improvised. Um, I feel like there's a magic that happens with improvisation, um, that is just so exciting, and it really came out in the Tank in that track. The other fun thing about that track is I got to use my what I call my dronified accordion, which is an accordion that I plug into various guitar pedals, and that sounded
Yeah,
really
that's
cool.
interesting. A dronified accordion.
Yeah. So I would say that that defines the album because that song really surfs that vocal terrain between ethereal, and then very very high notes, really high in my range, and then really deep in my range, very like throaty and plangent, and some angrier, more emotionally chthonic and edgy sounds vocally. So yeah, that song defines the album. And then the easiest one I would say is Jerez, which is a completely improvised piano track that is just one of those things that came out nearly perfect. Where after I was done, I was like, "What just happened? What just came through me?" And it's a song that I never get tired listening to. I just, yeah, I feel really grateful that that came through and that yeah, was recording at the time and got to capture that. So in a weird way, even though it's a song that is challenging to recreate, in the moment it just flowed and came out really easily.
Yeah, no, the improvisation seems like, not a lot of people can improvise. So when you go to record, like you said that a lot of songs are improvised. Do you come up with some of the lyrics in the spot? Do they just flow, or do you, or is it harder for you? Like you don't like that of like writing lyrics and going. You like that what comes out comes out. How does that work?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's different for each song. Some songs I have some lyrics or words or images in mind before I write the song, or sometimes I have lyrics and words and images, but I don't have the music yet, and then I
Okay.
put them together over time. Other times when I'm improvising, words will come out, or I'll use poetry or tarot to kind of get my right brain juiced, and then riff off of that. So sometimes the lyrics come out in the improvisation. I would say for at least 50% of the songs, though, the lyrics actually come last. And it's after, um, the writing of the melodies and the layers, or even parts for other instruments, that the lyrics and the meaning of the song will start to flow.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. So, what are some of the themes that you explore on this record?
Hmm. Like musical themes or
Yeah,
emotional themes?
musical and lyrical themes. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, Definitely musical themes of drones, um, and ways that drones can be, yeah, meditative and hypnotic, but also drones that can be really unsettling and more on the metal side, or like shoegazy. Um,
Yeah, like a band like Sono. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And also because I listen to a lot of Eastern music, and if you reach far back enough in my genes, through the Southern European Italian side, there's also some North African ancestry back there. So it's definitely, I gravitate towards a lot of Eastern modes and scales. So a lot of that just naturally comes out in a lot of my improvisations, like in the manner of serpents. Um, Percussive piano is another thing that comes up a lot that I'm going to be on the next album that I'm already writing. There's going to be a lot more of that. I love using piano as a percussive instrument. Um, and I would say vocally, yeah, again, playing with that idea of the refined and studied voice versus the raw, expressive, untidy voice. And yeah, kind of oscillating, vacillating between the two, and playing with the contrast. And then emotional themes, rancor, anger, feeling betrayed, isolation. There was definitely a lot of that during COVID. Um, and then really needing to recognize relationships that were falling away. Scorched Season, the first song on the album, is about that a lot. being able to walk away from things and dealing with recognizing death in relationships, but also like we don't like to acknowledge it, but death is a natural part. It's a natural part of life, and it's a natural part of some relationships.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so but some deaths are, more graceful than others, and some deaths are painful. Um, yeah, so looking at that, and then also there is a lot of spirituality on the album. Like I think music is inherently spiritual, and especially music that doesn't cater to capitalism, late stage capitalism. You know,
Yeah.
music that's really self-determined and are really about self-expression. Yeah, it's innately spiritual. So there's definitely a lot of exploration of my relationship to spirituality and what that sounds like.
Yeah, no, music can be spiritual. For me, growing up, my grandma thought that all my music was satanic, so she thought that I worship the devil, but because all the music. But yeah, no, no. But yeah, it's yeah that's the thing with this album. It's an album that really, like it sounds like really meditative and spiritual, because spiritual doesn't mean religious. It means like it's an album that like you could listen to it and like feel like you are out in nature.
Hmm.
I don't know if that was something intended, but that's what
I
uh because I
Yeah.
was listening to that like later at night, when I wanted to more zone down to sleep. I'm like, this is not the time to listen to Slayer. I'm like,
No
let's
raining
listen.
blood before bed?
Not before bed. No, no, no. So yeah, it's really cool, and I like it's very out of the box experimental music. So I think people that would like that would love it, because sometimes people can get bored of like that same pop songs that have like the same structure, and sometimes you listen to one song and like it just sounds like the
Right,
other song. So you
right.
cannot say this about this. I saw some influence, like I saw some like Chelsea Wolf and some other of those bands that you mentioned, like Sono, but yeah, pretty interesting. So for you, like since you seem to listen to some different type of music, like right now, what are you listening to currently? Like, is there like newer music that you're listening to?
Yeah. And also just to say too, thank you for sharing that you experienced Rancor Sucker as meditative and that you listen to it before bed. I think that's the beautiful thing is like once you release an album, all the listeners get to have their own relationship to it, and I let go of my end of the creation, and then yeah, people find their own connection to it. So whatever, whether somebody cooks spaghetti to it or paints or falls asleep or gets angry, there's a lot of anger on the album too, like that pleases me, whatever people do, however people are moved or inspired by it. What is on my rotation right now? I would have to look up the details, but I've been listening to Helen Money lately, the cellist. Allison Chesley, I think her name is. I've been getting into some of her solo work, and also she did a collaboration that came out recently with a synthesist and composer that is really interesting. I've actually been doing my vocal exercises to that album.
Cool.
Um, Anna von Hofswolf, I'm definitely a fan of her work. Nick's Electronic Drone Choir, I tend to listen to them when I do my yoga and vocal exercises. Um, those have been on my main rotation. Some Juliana Barwick. I think right now because I'm prepping for tour, I'm because I'm working so much on my own material rehearsing with cellist Randall Holt, who will be accompanying me on this small West Coast tour that kicks off next month.
Yeah,
I'm not
I'm
listening.
glad you transitioned to it, because I'm gonna show
Yeah, yeah,
the tour date. Yeah,
sure,
flyer. I have
yeah.
that.
Thanks. Um, I'm not listening to as wide a variety or like this super angsty stuff because I already have enough stress right now. I
So,
don't, the
Kiara,
super
are
angsty
you?
stuff won't feel so good right now. So a little bit more chill. Um, yeah, and I think working with Randall, we talk about different cello artists and experimental cellists. We were kind of comparing notes about that. So I think that's partly why I've been listening to more Helen Money lately.
Yes. So, Chiara, you mean to tell me that you don't listen to Cannibal Corpse while doing yoga?
But you know what? I actually, there's goth yoga here in the Bay Area, and I've been meaning to do like
There's
goth or metal
goth. What do you
yoga.
mean goth yoga? Like a
Goth
music?
yoga. There is somebody teaching a goth yoga class with like goth and metal and dark wave as the soundtrack.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah, I've talked to a few bands from the Bay Area. I talked to one last year that was like very The Cure influence. I can't remember the name of the band now, but pretty cool band. There's a lot of cool music in that in the San
yes.
Francisco area. So goth yoga, that's interesting. I just imagine them all dressed in black and yeah, interesting thing. So I'm glad you talked about the tour that you have, upcoming tour in October after the album comes out. I have here the flyer, so here I have the dates. So yeah, talk a little bit about like these upcoming dates and what can people expect.
Yeah, so the tour kicks off in LA, um, with a friend of mine, fabulously talented harpist and singer and cellist Joy Shannon. And a lot of her work is Celtic inspired, um, pagan inspired, and I know she's like dark folk, and she's also connected with the metal community. And yeah, I've known her for several years, and we've done a few shows together. So we're doing a show at this wonderful space called Where Monsters Dream in the Arts District. That's co-owned by another friend of mine, Zoe Guthrie, and it's actually a shop, and they host events. And um, her partner Jerry is an avant-garde fashion designer, and Zoe has a tea line, and they also sell some work made by local artists and jewelry designers. It's a beautiful shop, so it's going to be just like a really beautiful, intimate show in that space with fine tea. And then our hometown show is going to be at the Golden Bull in Oakland with two amazing, amazing women, Emily Jane White and Lacrimarum, which is Jessica Way's solo project. And
I love the
then,
name, Lacrimerum.
yes, it's beautiful, isn't it?
Yes.
Um, and then we're on to Portland at the Star Theater with amazing overtone singer, performance artist Soraya. And we'll be also Other, which is a Seattle-based ethereal dark wave act. They're going to be opening, and a friend of mine, DJ Wednesday, who DJs shoegaze and ethereal. So super stoked about that. And then we're going
Awesome.
to be wrapping up at the Rabbit Box in Seattle with Latona Adola, who I've also played with here in San Francisco about 5.5 years ago. And they are a fabulous mother-daughter dark folk act. So I feel so grateful on this tour to be supported by some of my absolute favorite dark, experimental, ethereal artists. Yeah, it's gonna be a
No,
fabulous.
it's interesting, and I like the this flyer. I like that you're holding. Well, I've done scuba diving, so that looks like something from
Ah,
underwater.
yeah, it's a piece of coral. Yeah,
Yes,
getting
I
underwater thing.
scuba dive, so I know what that is.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, that looks, yeah, it looks cool and in very artsy and like I like. So that's how I would describe you. The sound of your music. They put the label avant-garde. But I say it's avant-garde experimental music. But yeah, if you like metalheads can enjoy it because there's the other parts like
Yeah.
the harder parts. So it's music that can be enjoyed by different types of people. So
Yeah.
Chiara, it's been great, talking to you about the album and the process that you had for making this album. Well, before we go, what would you like to say, to the people who are watching this and what to expect from you in the next upcoming months before the tour? I know you told me that you're working on a follow-up album.
Yeah, that's already in the works. Yeah. Um, yeah, I'd also like to share to please check out the album trailer, which is basically a short experimental film.
I'm
So
gonna
because
put the
of
link.
the
Yeah.
cool, it was shot by Bobby Cochran, who's a tremendously talented cinematographer and photographer who's worked with Chelsea Wolfe actually and Emily Jane White and Emma Ruth Rundle and a bunch of other artists I really respect. He has an incredible eye. It was also edited by Alexandra Van Hazel, who was also just wonderful to work with. And kind of going with the uh, multimedia bent, I also created an art booklet that goes with the physical album that has photos documenting the tank and other places that were on this recording journey for this album. And the art booklet also has some original illustrations of mine, as well as an 11 by 17 poster. And
Wow.
it's limited edition, so there are only 100 copies of this CD box set with the art booklet and the poster, and I will be hand numbering and signing each of them. So yeah, for the real multimedia experience, I think that would be, yeah, your best bet to get the box set. And then of course, yeah, the album is also available digitally starting on September 29th. And the first single, In the Manner of Serpents, came out about a week ago, and the next will be out this Friday. Yeah.
So which one's the second single that's gonna be out?
La Perdita, the second track that was recorded in the tank.
Yeah. Yeah. So
It's
people you can check out the two tracks that are gonna be available. And yeah, pretty cool stuff. Good music. Different for you to check out. And yeah, I gotta say to the people, watch that trailer. And you're so soft spoken, and in that trailer, you kind of looked a little bit evil.
yeah, I know. I said that to
I'm
Bobby.
like, oh my god, she's gonna be scary when I when I talk to her.
Oh, well, I see a
But
big
you're
smile, so you
yeah,
could handle it if I were scary. But
yes,
yeah, yeah, there again that interplay, right? And like there's more to people than meets the eye. We all have worlds inside of us, and art provides that place to explore the darker side. So yeah, I really enjoyed that in that trailer, being able to explore the darker side and just like what that metaphor is for, that alchemical process of confronting one's shadow. Yeah.
yeah, no, it's very interesting. So Chiara, again, thank you for taking some time of your day for to chatting with me here on the couch. So people, September 29th, the album is out. I'm gonna put the links for people who want to pre-order that box set and links so people can watch the official trailer. So
Yeah.
until next time, people, this is Hector, the Shield Dude on a couch, and I'll see you all